Hitting the button, was it do the football or talk about the thing, or was it talk about the football and do the thing?
I believe the plan now, and if I'm wrong, please tell me, is to just go ahead and start with the.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Lateral Show. Fasten your seatbelts, because here we go.
Welcome into another edition of the Lateral Show, a sideways look at fantasy football, but no longer the number one podcast without any check marks, because I like Twitter Blue, okay? I like the features. It gave me a check mark. It is what it is. Sue me. My name is Herms. You can follow me on Twitter at Herms NFL, joined as always by my co-host and homeboy, McLateral. What is up, my dude?
How's it going, people? Yeets and greets, seasons, yeetings, and we are fully into playoff season at this point, or some of us might be fully out of playoff season at this point, and some of us might be partway in between. I had my heart broken, of course, this week by Donta Foreman getting me 0.9 points in what ended up being a less than 5-point loss. Absolutely heartbreaking. Had I played Pierre Strong, you know, what the smart money was, I would have won. You know, this is why we do it. This is why we are fantasy analysts, so that we can give you just weeks upon weeks of prep, weeks upon weeks of analysis, only to lose to our beer drinking buddies because of injuries and because of weird gimmicky plays. And we definitely got a weird gimmicky play this week.
That we did, and we will talk about that a little bit more, because I'll tell you what, that really upset me. But like you said, there are a lot of people who maybe had their teams go home proverbially from the fantasy playoffs. 2022 is kind of over for you. So what we're going to do in this episode is look ahead to some things we are all keeping our eye on for 2023, and then for those of you that are still participating, we'll throw some little information at you for waiver claims that we think you could probably go out and make for week 16 specifically. But helping us do that today, I'll tell you what, look, if you're not listening to the Fits on Fantasy podcast, I don't know what's wrong with you. You really got to add that to the rotation. He is my former boss over at Fantasy Pros. His name is Pat Fitzmaurice. Hello.
Herms, Malcolm, how are you guys? Great to be here with you. And hopefully more of the people watching the show are still around than, done for the season. So.
Yeah, it makes me so. I barely made the playoffs in like any of my leagues, and if I hadn't played Tyler Huntley, if I had played like almost any other quarterback, I would have been fine. It made me sad. It made me sad, so sad. But I digress. This isn't about me. Oh, McLeod, you were on mute, buddy.
The magical mute button. I got the bye week in one league, so I'm still alive.
Nice.
But before we continue and talk about, some of the other things and also recapping last week's episode, Pat, tell us how you are doing in some of your leagues, because we already complained about ours, so it's only fair that we give you that opportunity.
Sure. I've got a few left, but my heart is definitely heavy for having lost my best team in my most important league. Lost by 0.6. And I did it because, I had a great week. My team played really well. Total slugfest. It was, Rocky Balboa versus Apollo Creed, just throwing haymakers at each other. But I left Ramondre Stevenson on the bench because I was concerned about his health. I played Terry McLaurin instead. That turned out to be an ill-fated decision. And, I thought I'd made the right decision in the first quarter because Stevenson was kind of rotating in with, I don't think he even started in that game. I think wasn't Pierre Strong out there the first series?
I think that is correct. Yes,
man. So just when I saw him leave that game in week 14 and try to come back and was unable to stay in the game, I kind of made my mind up then and there that I was not going to play him in week 15. And here's the cruel irony, guys. This team that I was playing would not have even been in the playoffs, but there was another team that was trying to, it was down to this guy by like 0.6 points the previous week, and all he needed was 0.7 from Kyler Murray to knock this guy out. And Kyler Murray tears his ACL 1 yard short of what he needed to get to knock this dude out.
Oh,
and for this, and like, had that happened, had Kyler Murray, gone down 1 yard farther ahead, this guy wouldn't have been in the playoffs, and I would have had a much easier matchup. I would have played a guy who's like only good player. Jonathan Taylor went down on his first touch, and I would have trucked this guy by like 40. But no, I had to play the Jalen Hurts, Raheem Mostert team. And so that's my tale of woe. But, I got a couple other teams still in there swinging. So, hopefully a championship or two in another league would sort of, ease my pain.
Absolutely. And best of luck to you in that pursuit for sure. But, again, listeners, viewers, this is why we're looking ahead to 2023 in this episode, because it makes us feel maybe just a little bit better. But before we get into that, and before we recap last week's episode, we're not going to go super long on our soapboxes today because we have our guest. But I just want to say, Jacoby Myers, you are giving the Lateral a bad name, okay? Only we get to give the Lateral a bad name based off of our own ineptitude. Come on, Jacoby Myers. What did you think was going to happen? Throwing it all the way back to Mac Jones on that play. Like, you don't just get to re-roll an entire pass play like that. Like, and maybe he just forgot what the score was or something. Maybe he thought they were down and needed to keep the play alive, but like,
well, so what I have heard is that the play was a draw and they were just going to roll with that. And it's actually Ramondre that starts the chaos. He was not supposed to continue the play.
That is true.
He was supposed to go down. And for some reason, he decides to lateral it. And then Jacoby Myers, I guess since he's thrown the odd passing touchdown as a Patriot, decided, I can do this again, but backwards. And to be fair, he did, just, to the other team. These are things that happen, except they don't. I think it's only happened twice that there has been a walk-off lateral touchdown in the NFL, and they've both resulted in Patriots losses. The other time was in 2018, where Miami successfully did it against the Patriots defense.
Do better, New England. Do better.
Yeah, Bill Belichick, get your act together. What do you think you are? Some Super Bowl winning coach or something?
Yeah, he's really got to prove it to people out there if we're really going to start taking this guy seriously. But I don't know, Pat. Any thoughts on the bizarre lateral? Just
yeah, I kind of wish it hadn't happened because maybe I would have won that game. I had Josh Jacobs and really could have used overtime and maybe another 7 yards out of Josh Jacobs. So I was pretty disappointed. Happened. But that was just and like, even if he had successfally thrown that lateral to Mac Jones, did he think Mac Jones was going to like zigzag 50 yards for a touchdown? That just one of the more inexplicable decisions we've seen in the NFL this year.
Yeah, because as we know, elite Konami code quarterback Mac Jones is definitely the one.
So the best thing I heard about Mac Jones's handling of that play, I think it was Kevin Clark from Slow News Day on The Ringer relaying something that Roger Sherman from The Ringer said, which was like, he looked like he was getting ready to take a charge in basketball. Like, he had his feet planted. He was ready to take that offensive foul and just let Chandler Jones hit him. But unfortunately, that is not the correct sport. It is not how that works.
Yeah. Oh, man. Just, I don't know. Like I said, only we get to give a bad name to the lateral. Nobody else. Okay.
It's a sideways look at fantasy football, not real football.
Exactly. Yeah. This is our shtick. Damn it. All right, but now that we've gotten that out of the way, now that we've gotten some other silliness out of the way.
Well, I've still got my shtick.
Exactly.
Which is, okay, y'all can go back to not watching soccer anymore. I am so sick of you guys pretending that you watch soccer. Whoop-de-doo. Like, let me have my sport back. I don't need posts or tweets, whatever it is, about how, oh man, they're deciding the game by penalty kicks. This is silly. Like, oh, I'm sorry. You just watched the greatest World Cup final like ever. like Kylian Mbappe and Lionel Messi going toe to toe. Like, again, I didn't watch it because, as we've discussed, I did not watch the World Cup this year due to the various potpourri of human rights abuses committed by the Qatari government. But you can go back to previous episodes to focus on that. But again, like, just enjoy the rest of football season. You can have it. It's yours. Peace be with you. Give me back my soccer. I am tired of the armchair quarterbacking of a sport that doesn't have a quarterback.
Or armchair midfielder ring. Or
See, again, this is right.
ring.
Just no, go back to football. It's okay. You gave soccer a shot. It's fine. The world thinks you're like cosmopolitan. Just people hitting each other. Let's get back to it.
There we go. Good call. Pat, if you have any grievances that you would like to air, that is what this part of the podcast is for.
No, I mean, it's 6 days away from the Boxing Day Premier League extravaganza, so you can,
trust me, I'm aware.
Always an excellent, very underrated sports day, the Boxing Day EPL bonanza.
Right up there with Thanksgiving football and Christmas Day basketball, the Boxing Day EPL Fest.
Yes.
Couldn't agree more.
And I would also say another, sporting related event that has to be high up on that list is the fastest minute in fantasy football podcasting, with McLateral giving us the recap of the things that we went over last week before we hop into this week's topic. I will hand it over to you. Tell people what they missed if they didn't tune in.
All right. Well, last week we talked about fringe quarterbacks. We did a roundup on whether these quarterbacks are keeping their job or not. Jared Goff wasn't pretty, but the Lions won. It seems likely that a quarterback would have to fall into Detroit's lap for them to move on from Goff at this point, at least for next year. Geno Smith was relatively fine in a game he was always going to struggle in. I think his chances of re-signing in Seattle are the same as they were when we talked about him last week. Same with Daniel Jones, who played terribly, but they won. He still feels like a lock to return, especially since they can just give him the old franchise tag. They could probably re-sign him if they wanted to. Saquon Barkley, of course, complicating things a little there because they might want to franchise him instead. But that is a conversation for another day because now we can move on to Mike White, who was injured. And Zach Wilson showed some flashes last week. I wouldn't say he was good, but he showed some flashes. And I'm very worried that Zach Wilson wins this back because long-term he is not the solution. Unfortunately, neither is Taylor Heineke probably. A playoff miss probably ends his chances of getting that job, and losing really hurt those playoff chances. Just like they would have killed the Arizona Cardinals if they weren't, I think, already eliminated from the playoffs the week before. But we talked about whether you can play any Arizona Cardinals with Kyler Murray out. We said no for Colt McCoy, which turned out to be very correct because he went out of the game with an injury. Whoops. James Conner, yes. And still, yes. Awesome. Keontae Ingram, Corey Clement, still no. And again, still no. DeAndre Hopkins, yes. Okay, so we're like looking really good. We got this right. Marquise Brown, unless you have better options, you probably have to play him. And that was absolutely incorrect. He was not good. Unless Kyler Murray is the quarterback, I don't know that he is going to be good. So you need to just stay away at this point. Same with Robbie Anderson, who we were much more on the fence about anyway. And he did not look good. Trey McBride kind of did, but it was also oddly a weirdly good week for tight ends. So despite his decent production, he was tight end 16 in PPR, so didn't quite pan out for you. But two guys who did, well, a guy and a group of guys, Matt Prater, who I wasn't so bullish on, but said in Denver looked like he could do well. He did very well, as did the Cardinals defense, which again, it's like, I'm not betting on them long-term, but in Denver, it's a great matchup. And sure enough, they capitalized on it. And that was last week's episode.
There we go. The recap brought to you by Thrive Fantasy. Do you like off-the-cuff ad reads with absolutely no script whatsoever? Do you like somebody vaguely describing to you what an app is? Sign up for Thrive Fantasy if you like playing daily fantasy sports, but it's mostly just prop bets instead of like the other kinds of daily fantasy sports. If you use promo code Herms, you get a 100% match on your first deposit up to $100 hairs. So I'm saying, you put down $20, they give you $20. Boom, you have $40. Another example, you put down $30, they give you $30. Boom, you get $60. But if you do this with $101 or anything over that, they will not match that. You have to keep that in mind. This only works if you deposit up to $100, then they will match. over at Thrive Fantasy using promo code HERMS. That is how you do it, folks. That's why they pay me the big bucks. Now we get into,
but only up to 100 of the big bucks.
Only up to one. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, so they don't match me after that. But now we get into the fun part of the program. Three things that each of us are looking forward to in the 2023 NFL/fantasy season. Pat, as you are the guest on this program, we will let you go first. It doesn't have to be like the number one thing necessarily. I mean, it doesn't have to be put out in any sort of order, but just like, what's your first thing that you're bringing to the table that you are looking forward to for next year?
I am going to urge people to take their shots on rookie receivers drafted in the top 40 in their fantasy drafts next year, because we continue to see some of these guys hit every year, and they don't all hit. I mean, we kind of didn't get hits on Drake London, who was wide receiver 41 at ADP this year, and Treylon Burks, kind of a star-crossed year for him. Signs of life, but didn't really help fantasy teams. He was the wide receiver 50 in ADP. Jahan Dotson had his moments, but was never really a comfortable start, wide receiver 59. But we got some hits. Chris Olave, who's ADP, wide receiver 44. Garrett Wilson, wide receiver 49. Christian Watson, wide receiver 67. These guys were great values. And you could get these guys at a low risk spot in your fantasy drafts. And we kind of have seen other guys hit like this in recent years. In 2021, Jamar Chase's preseason ADP was wide receiver 27. Jalen Waddle, who had a 1,000-yard season as a rookie, wide receiver 46. And in 2020, Justin Jefferson, wide receiver 49, CeeDee Lamb, wide receiver 38. So there are misses. And, you don't even have to be a scout. You don't have to watch these guys and know which rookies to let the NFL teams do the work. And, you're going to miss on a few of these guys just like they do. Like, I wasn't screaming at my TV that the Eagles should have taken Justin Jefferson ahead of Jalen Reagor because I didn't really know at the time. I kind of like both guys. And, but if you miss, it's going to be a not big of a miss. You can drop the guy, like picking a guy wide receiver 49, wide receiver 54. If you drop him in week 4, it's fine. It's totally fine. But every year we're seeing guys hit and pay off big. The pot odds make it worth your while to spend at least a couple of your draft picks on a rookie receiver drafted in the top 40. Because then your odds really kind of fall off after the top 40. But those top 40 guys, golden.
It happens every year for the most part. There's just something about it that, it kind of like, to your point, like us, when we talk about this all the time, when it comes to draft strategy and stuff, like you want to save your kind of riskier picks for much later. You don't want to get cute early on. So by virtue of doing things that way, like building your bench with those types of players, just it's become the optimal play. Like, I don't know, McLateral, do you have any sort of thoughts about this? Because I know that you have certainly in recent years deployed this strategy a lot in our home league specifically, but also in other leagues that you do. Like, this is something I know that you do a lot. So,
well, yes. So like, I do not proclaim to be an expert by any means on scouting rookie wide receivers, though I would say I was definitely screaming at the TV when Jalen Reagor got drafted. In fact, I think I texted Herms and I was just like, Jalen Reagor, question mark. Now, to be fair, I also wasn't just like, oh man, Justin Jefferson, future Hall of Famer, but when these guys go that early, you have to take a chance. And I think that is something that I have preached over the past couple of years. Like, I know last year I was going on to any podcast that would have me and being like, hey, Jamar Chase, he's a top 5 draft pick. His buddy literally recruited him to an NFL team. NFL teams don't recruit. And this guy literally recruited this guy onto an NFL team. They're going to use him. You should take advantage of that. Chris Olave, I had a lot of this year, but that's just because he was a guy I happened to be particularly hyped on. So had he not panned out, that could have easily not gone my way like it did when I liked Terrace Marshall, who admittedly not quite as high draft capital, but still was part of that electric LSU offense. But this leads me to my first thing. I want to load up a wide receiver. I just want to get all the wide receivers I can. And like, I think Pat is onto it where it's like the like 5th to 7th round, 5th to 8th round, where you can get some of these rookie guys with depressed ADPs is exactly a great place to do it. Like, take a guy like Justin Jefferson, Devontae Adams, one of those top guys in the first round, maybe load up with a couple RBs and then just smash wide receiver down the line. Because it's way better betting on one of those lottery tickets than betting on a dead zone running back.
Yeah, and there's data to back that up. I mean, anybody that's ever, listened to the stuff that JJ Zacharyson does, I mean, like, he does a really good job of outlining that. And especially because, like, ADP typically tells us which dead zone running back is the one that you should invest in. It's typically the one that's like higher. If it's like a weird committee we're not sure of. So like the people that insist on taking the other one because it's like, oh, there's a chance, blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't know. He did a bunch of research about it. He could explain the numbers better than I can. So I'm just poorly regurgitating this information. But like, yeah, like with how risky all of that is, it stands to reason to just like, to both of your point, whether it's like rookie or just an already existing veteran wide receiver, like it's a good little range you want to attack for sure. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that, Pat.
Yeah, I totally agree with McLateral. And I think it kind of depends though on this assumes I think that you need to start 3 wide receivers. A little different for me. Sure. I think if you need to start 2, but I think more leagues have gone the way of starting 3. If you have to start 3 receivers, I am never going to get caught short at wide receiver. And like, I want to beat people badly at that position because it's so critical. And the other thing is like, generally what you get is what you pay for is what you get at wide receiver. You do not see guys come out of the ether to have impact seasons, guys who go undrafted at wide receiver coming in and having top 15, top 20 years. It just doesn't happen. At running back, it happens all the time. Like guys that, weren't in your top 60 at running back on your, preseason draft board have been guys that people are just, throwing wads of fab dollars at during the season. It happens every year because running back's as much about opportunity as talent, always. And, but wide receiver, you got to spend up. So I totally agree.
And I'll tell you what, if you are going to spend up, in that sort of range next year, I'm going to nominate somebody before I get into my thing, just because it's another opportunity for me to do the same thing that I've done repeatedly over the course of the history of this podcast, because Jordan Addison, the pride of Frederick, Maryland, let's go. He went to high school down the street from where I regularly get Taco Bell. Wherever he ends up getting drafted, I'm just going to have a shit ton of that guy, because I'll tell you what, he may be small, but he is speedy, and boy, can he get open. So I mean, just quickly, I'll kind of throw it at McLateral, you first, and then Pat, just like nominate somebody. Just like somebody just kind of reading through, making predictions now, who you think might be around there in ADP. Who's someone you got?
Pat, why don't you go ahead first?
Oh, are we talking rookies?
Yeah, rookie first? Wide receiver coming in. If there's anyone like already percolating in your mind.
At wide receiver, man, Maryland's got a couple nice. I still think Jackson Smith and Jigba is going to pop.
Absolutely,
even though kind of a washed out year for him, but I wonder if that's going to make people forget just how talented this cat is. And he got overshadowed. Marvin Harrison Jr. is just an absolute freak. So he stole a lot of Smith and Jigba's thunder, but man, I mean, he's going to be really good. Like the duo that they had. I mean, I think that rivals, maybe doesn't rival, but like not that far below the Chase Jefferson combo at LSU.
Oh,
in
absolutely.
terms of just pure talent. I mean, Chase Jefferson is pretty hard to beat, but the Ohio State guys are right up there.
Well, and it's an Ohio State duo that is following up an Ohio State duo. Like we just saw what Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave did to the NFL.
Yeah.
And like these guys are arguably better like people have their own like level of opinion on that. I'm personally higher on Olave than most, but like no one is going to look at you crazy if you say Marvin Harrison Jr. and Jackson Smith and Jigba are better than those two guys that we just saw kill it as rookies and like in bad situations. Like Olave had very little to work with in New Orleans, and Garrett Wilson had to deal with Zach Wilson.
Right.
Like it's not like these guys had Joe Burrow throwing them the ball in their first season in the NFL, and they still did well. So, I mean, Pat just, took it right out of my mouth. I'm in full agreement with him on the rookie to target.
All right. Well, I guess that kind of frees me up to go into my number one thing, or just the first thing that came to. Again, I'm not putting these thoughts in any sort of, inherent important order, but with how talented, we're keeping it in the rookie realm here. I don't know. I'm following that thread. With how talented this incoming class is. And we're going to see how that's going to end up shaking out because we haven't seen the combine yet. We haven't seen whatever. But like Bijan Robinson, everybody's thrilled. Jahmyr Gibbs, everybody's thrilled. And then there's kind of just like that mishmash of like Sean Tucker from Syracuse, Tank Bigsby doing the whole thing. I really thought Zach Charbonnet should have declared last year when he had the opportunity because for as good as he was and for his big, like his size speed combo, just like it screamed Nick Chubb to me when I was kind of like evaluating him as part of my process last year. Couple that with the very intriguing free agent class because we could see Saquon Barkley potentially not return to New York. Tony Pollard is another player that like maybe he's not going to be sticking around in Dallas. I don't know. Like
Josh Jacobs almost certainly moving on. Rashad Penny, granted his knees may stay back in Seattle, but in theory his contract will go elsewhere. Like, there's a lot of movement.
Yeah, dude. So like and I've talked about it on this show a ton. I just got finished talking about it on another show that I was on, like the talent cycle in the NFL. We're in the middle of that pancake at running back, just about to fully flip over, because like Dalvin Cook's not getting any younger. Derrick Henry's turning 29? My boy Alvin Kamara, who on my soapbox last week complained about, cratering my home league team. These guys are aging out. New young guys are coming in, but there's still some of those tweener leftover guys that are set to hit the free agent market. I'm just fascinated how many backfields are just going to be completely ruined and like how ambiguous it's going to be. Because like, we were talking about the dead zone and how weird that is a little bit earlier. Think about how weird it's going to be now. Like all of these people aging out of relevance and new faces and new places. Like, I don't know. Pat, how nervous are you about just the landscape ahead of us? And how difficult do you think it's really going to be for us to pick out who's going to be good and who's not?
Yeah, nervous isn't the word, Herms. I'm giddy. It's going to be the first few days of free agency and watching all of these backfields get reshaped. It's going to give us so much cannon fodder for these shows. And just like everyone's going to want to talk about this. People are going to completely flip out. Dynasty rosters are going to have huge value swings based on landing spots. And, we'll see some musical chairs where guys like we thought maybe deserve to be an RB1 somewhere are sort of left without a home and like are going to have to wedge into committee situations. So that plus this terrific running back class coming in. Like it's a good year for rookie running backs. And that coupled with all the free agents, man, it's just like a total overhaul at the running back position. I'm totally here for it. It's going to be fun.
Yeah. So McLateral, I'll kind of, get a little mini question before we move on to Pat's second thing. Just go ahead, take your pick, kind of sleeper backfield that you think might just be completely ruined, that nobody's expecting is going to get ruined.
Well, so I don't know about ruin, but I have one that I'm intrigued about. And I'm actually going to leapfrog Pat here with my second thing because we're really on it. And I just want to attack it.
That's fair.
I want to draft running backs on rookie deals only. Period. The end. That is my strat. I don't want to be caught holding the bag on someone dealing with that one injury too many or that one rushing attempt too many. I want guys on rookie deals only outside of 2. CMC, Austin Eckler. That's it. They're saved due to passing volume. No other running back is treated the way they are. And the only ones that are frankly guys like kind of on the rookie deal. I mean, Joe Mixon's approached it at times, but like we're seeing the bell cow die largely as a concept, except like some of these rookie running backs will just get a ton of work because they're fresh, they're young, and they're inexpensive relatively compared to paying a franchise running back. So they'll just run the wheels off these guys. I mean, we're seeing it happen in Las Vegas right now with Josh Jacobs, where end of his rookie deal, they're running the wheels off of him. And that's the backfield I'm intrigued by, because that is a backfield that, provided that Josh McDaniels is not fired, which he should be, but he won't be, they're going to want to bring in a running back. Zamir White's not going to be the answer. Amir Abdullah is not going to be the answer. They're going to want to bring in a running back. And I think there's a real chance it's Damian Harris, which will be interesting. But if it's not, if they bring in a rookie, I absolutely want that rookie. I think that rookie will get a ton of work. But Damian Harris is a really interesting wrench in that one. And then if it becomes Damian Harris, I think it is something I'll stay away from because he won't be on a rookie deal. And so I'm just not going to touch it.
All right, Pat, over to you. Pick up the baton wherever you want from there, because, I mean, there were a lot of great points made in there.
Yeah, boy, I don't even know where to go with this one. But that is an excellent choice by McLateral for one of the backfields. Like, we're gonna have to watch for sure. Yeah, and especially like we thought maybe the Raiders were going to have one of the lesser offensive lines in the league this year. Their run blocking has been fantastic this year. And I was just looking up their offensive line coach's name the other day, and I wish I had it in front of me, but I don't. But that guy's done an amazing job because, man, have they overachieved. So, yeah, that's all I'll add to that.
Do you have a fun sleeper kind of surprise backfield that could get blown up?
Oh, man.
Because, I mean,
yeah.
at this stage, if you don't, I mean, that's fine. But
I don't off the top of my head. I know how many impending free agents there are, and it's a long list. But I think half of them are going to get blown up based on free agents. There's so many free agents, all these running backs, and then the wide receiver free agent crop is just hot garbage. I mean, it's just terrible. But man, the running backs that's what's gonna have us all excited come spring.
Absolutely. And I think to that point, it further illustrates the whole wide receiver strategy thing that we were talking about before, because it's just especially with the incoming rookies and stuff, it's it's still new faces and new places, but at least you get a high capital, kind of young, exciting guy over some sort of vet that's been around for a while on some middling deal with an ambiguous situation that they're joining. Because not all of these guys are just going to turn into Zay Jones, folks. Okay, they don't grow on trees, and even then, that took a while. I said that on our first episode we did on this YouTube channel before the season started, and I am technically correct, the best kind of correct about Zay Jones. But oh my, yeah, whole thing. Gee, I've lost my place. I've lost my head. Okay, so you went over your second.
Yeah, let's throw it back to Pat. Pat,
yes.
What is your second thing? And real quick, that O-line coach, you were looking for the name. It's Carmen Brasillo. Luckily, we have an excellent fact-checking department here at the Lateral.
I know. I just wanted to spit out the Italian guy. What was his name? Thank you for coming up with that. I knew it was something very Italian, and yeah. All right. So my second thing is, and I heard Rich Rebar and Matt Kelly talking about this on a podcast recently, and this was actually something that came up with a buddy of mine who raised this issue when we were playing golf maybe a month ago. When are people going to stop chasing Chiefs, these peripheral supporting cast member Chiefs? These guys have been such sucker plays, and we're falling for it every time. Like people, and even I was guilty of maybe entertaining the offer that we should follow the money with the MVS signing, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Patrick Mahomes. How could that not work out? It didn't work out so well. Sky Moore, like everyone flipped out, and people were taking Sky Moore ahead of like. There were some drafts where he was going ahead of like Olave and Garrett Wilson because he landed with the Chiefs, and everyone, well, Garrett Wilson's going to play with Zach Wilson and Sky Moore is going to play with Patrick Mahomes. That turned out to be a huge mistake. Juju's been okay, I guess. And we're like seeing Isaiah Pacheco. Yeah, like some people were kind of in on him, but I don't know that he's been like a league winner for anyone. He's.
Speaking of a backfield that could get shooken up,
yeah, definitely. And like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he was the guy who kind of started this. I mean, like even this year, some people were still holding out hope for Ronald Jones being a thing. Just because
some people,
Kansas City. Is that you, Herms?
It's absolutely Herms.
It's just me at this point. I'm the only one left.
I wasn't trying to just shiv you there, Herms.
No, it was brilliant. Of all the things to bring up, some people were into Ronald Jones. It's like some people.
And in fairness, I did this to myself.
Yeah.
But so, yeah, as McLateral was just saying, like that's a place where we're going to see some running backs land. And like, let's not just automatically rush to embrace these guys, whoever they may be, the new guys in the Chiefs backfield, just because they're in the Chiefs backfield. Like it has not been the like gold mine that we think it's always going to be when guys go to the Chiefs.
I said it at some point within the last 5 episodes. I can't remember what it was, but something to the effect of, I don't really care a ton about draft capital necessarily, depending on the position, obviously. But the thing I would even care less about in certain respects, at least as far as it being something that causes me to be like astronomically higher on a player than I was in the pre-draft process, is landing spot. Because it's like, for this exact reason, like I understand in theory, good player, good team, good point, good results, championship trophy, like largely rings true. But there are cases in which that just doesn't work out. The Chiefs are the prime example of this. And I think, like, oh my God, don't let that stand in the way of things that you may think.
I think we're willing. So I'd say there's 2 points. One, Pat is absolutely correct. Like chasing the Chiefs is the thing that has not paid off. And unfortunately, I think people will continue to do it as long as it's Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, because you on paper want a part of that. Like that is something you would want a part of. But to your point about landing spot, Herms, I think we are too quick to forget that good player part of the equation or overinflate how good that player is the second the landing spot is juicy. Like Sky Moore had red flags coming in, and then those red flags disappeared as soon as he went to the Chiefs.
That's the red jersey. It blends in,
Like, I don't actually hate people having tried for MVS. I think because the cost is so low. So, like, I do agree that, like, it definitely didn't pan out. And I think there was always that risk it wouldn't pan out. But, like, he was my pick. And Herms will tell you, he was my pick from that wide receiver core. Because, like you, Pat, it's like, follow the money. Like, they paid this guy more than they paid anyone else. Sky Moore, like, he didn't get the, like, insane draft capital we were hoping for from some guys. So it's like, yeah, take a shot on him. And luckily, he didn't cost you that much. But, like, guys like Sky Moore, you probably spent way more on Sky Moore than you needed to. Guys like CEH, you spent way more on CEH than you needed to. By the way, how quickly does Saquon Barkley become 101 if he gets signed by the Chiefs? I'm just going for chaos bombs left and right here.
I don't know if they have that financial capital. But
I don't know that they do either, but like I'm just going to dream for a moment here just to like imagine like people's reaction if he is on an like people will be like, "Oh man, this is going to be like Shady McCoy 2.0." Like I think it will get outrageous. But yeah, Pat brought up a ton of great points there. I definitely agree.
That's why we only bring on the best guests, people. We don't come here with mediocre information. We only bring anyway. So we got that. We got some wonderful things. So you got your two. So this is on to me for number 2 now. If I'm following the order.
Yes, U2 for number 2.
U2 for shout out the band U2. Just because I don't
Also,
know.
yes.
It came up organically. I have to do it. So I'm kind of borrowing from this exercise, the same exercise that we're doing right now that we did last year. Kind of. The Jacksonville Jaguars are looking very impressive as of late. Like, regardless of what their record says right now, they're good.
Yeah.
They're good. They are really good. And I think for as much kind of hesitation people had for whatever reason, like some of it justifiable, some of it not really. Like, remember that point in the discourse when people were like, Trevor Lawrence, I don't know about this. Is he ever going to be the? It's like, yes, of course he's going to be fine. Like, he was one of the, like, if not the easiest quarterback evaluation we've had in like the last decade. And now we're seeing all of that click. And this is a team that will only get better, assuming Calvin Ridley looks anything like the Calvin Ridley of old next year. Like, a lot of the things that you and I predicted, and it wasn't just us. I mean, a lot of people, kind of predicted they were going to take a step forward. Like,
it wasn't that hard. Like,
yeah.
Let's be clear. It was not that hard to take a step forward from a franchise with a coach that kicks his kicker.
Yeah, it's like with the bar being that low, because like the bar that Urban Meyer sets is just below the Earth's mantle at that point. But like with how high paced Doug Peterson's offenses have historically been, and the amount of resources that they invested into just putting weapons around Trevor Lawrence, like Zay Jones's name already came up. Travis Etienne is a guy that teased us a little bit. I'm still holding out hope there.
Showed some flashes.
Yeah. Because like immediately coming out of the bye, that game against the Ravens, he tweaked his foot. I don't know if that's been the reason he's been slowed down as of late or not. I'm kind of just spitballing theories. But like, we at least showed he could be elite. That's that team that, like, I'm doing it again. I'm planting the flag. Like, that's going to be the team I'm going to try to have as many players from, just because, like, they're going to be kind of like that darling sleeper sexy option that people are going to pick to potentially do something cool. I'm looking forward to seeing more of the Jacksonville Jaguars. I mean, is there anything in particular about that team, Pat, that you are kind of intrigued by as they move from the Urban Meyer era to the goodness that we're seeing now?
Yeah, the return of Calvin Ridley is definitely going to be intriguing. I want to see if like Evan Engram can keep this up. This sort of it's funny. Like, we've seen a couple of these sort of 6th year, 7th year breakouts at tight end with David Njoku and Evan Engram. But the one, like, I wish I had a better handle on Travis Etienne. Like, he had over 1,000 receiving yards his last 2 years at Clemson. And I thought he was going to be this, terrific, like, perfect modern NFL back. And like, in my mind's eye, all the highlights of him from those years at Clemson, like, he was always really good in space. And I thought he was going to be this guy who you want to get out on the edges and get him. And like, he hasn't been that guy. He's been like a more traditional, like, sort of running back. It's strange. He's not the guy I thought we were going to get. And it's not necessarily that I'm disappointed in the talent level or anything, but I just feel like it's kind of a bait and switch with what kind of back he is. I don't know. I'm not sure entirely what we have with him, which is probably going to push me to avoid him in drafts next year. Not because I dislike him, but just because I'm not, for where he's going to go, I want to be sure of what I'm getting. And I don't know what I'm getting with Travis Etienne anymore.
And that's why I included him in the buy, sell, hold report over at draftsharks.com as a hold, because it's like, I mean, what are you really going to do with him at this point? Like, you've already seen a little bit from him that, could possibly spark some interests from other managers in your league, but you've also seen enough irritating stuff with him that, like, even if you wanted to try to move him, like, what sort of return on that investment are you getting? Probably not anything close to the initial investment cost. So, like, you're kind of stuck in limbo with him anyway. I mean, like, McLateral, it's somebody that we talked about a lot on this show in the preseason ahead of this year. What are your kind of vibes on ETN at this point?
So I have a take that might be a hot take.
Oh, here we go.
Travis Etienne should not be a traditional bell cow. And until they bring in a James Robinson replacement, he will suffer. So I think that the perfect comp for usage, not necessarily like, raw athleticism, anything like that, Travis Etienne needs to be turned into Austin Eckler. That is what he needs to succeed. And I think that by the end of the season, Doug Peterson will get that. I think the Jags will get that because their usage is honestly surprisingly similar, at least in terms of the amount of the rushing attempts they take. But we had James Robinson spelling ETN, taking off some of that bruising, allowing him to be the change that defenses just couldn't account for. And that's now gone. Like Snoop Connor is not that, Jamal Agnew is not that. JaMychal Hasty, while we love him here at the Lateral, he's arguably even more Eckler-esque than Travis Etienne is. He's definitely more pass catching, more quick burst than he is a bruising downhill runner. If they paired him, for example, with someone like Brian Robinson, which again, they won't because Brian Robinson will be safely ensconced in DC, but I want that kind of runner. I want someone that's just going to mop up some shots from the defensive line, and then you can just put in ETN for still the majority of the backfield's work, but you'll have to guess what that's going to be. You'll have to guess, is this a pass play? Is this a run play? How are they going to utilize this guy? And I think at the moment, defenses just aren't having to guess that.
I feel that vibe.
Yeah. Does ETN have that sort of pass? Because I thought McLateral that's what he was going to be. I thought he was going to be like an Eckler type. But now they're bringing in JaMychal Hasty and throwing to him I don't know. They're not throwing to ETN and they're throwing to Hasty. And it makes me wonder if ETN, maybe we weren't oversold a bit on his pass catching, just sort of based on his Clemson career.
It's not impossible. I'm not going to say, oh, you're worrying too much. You're not. It's not impossible at all. I think that Peterson is very much figuring out how this offense works on the fly. I think the Jaguars, frankly, as an organization, are sort of figuring out how this offense, how this team works on the fly. And they're starting to figure it out. And I think ultimately, if they find a good James Robinson replacement, then trading away James Robinson will have panned out just fine for them. But I think they tried, and I think it was Darrell Henderson, and it didn't work. I think that's what they brought Henderson in to do. Henderson would be exactly the right kind of guy to take that load off of ETN's shoulders, and it didn't work. And so JaMychal Hasty can't be that guy. So they're having to pivot ETN, who is somehow the best suited running back to do that running work. They're pivoting him into that role, which he's just not naturally suited for. So that doesn't preclude you from being correct that even if they figure it all out, he's not the prolific pass catcher we thought he was going to be. But I think this is very much we're not going to see a positive result this year regardless. In terms of how ETN can truly shake out in that backfield, I think it will very much be in next year in the offseason, seeing what their moves are, seeing how some preseason stuff shakes out, and then going from there. So I think the word of caution is wise, but I think the potential still exists.
That's some good food for thought. Some very good food for thought. I'm really glad we got that one out there. And then that leads into, I believe, would that be your third take, McLateral, or does it go back down?
We'll go with Pat. We'll let the guest go first.
Yeah.
All right. I'll make this short but sweet. I'm going to pay up at quarterback in more leagues next year. And, you invoked the name earlier, Herms, of J.J. Zacharyson and the late round quarterback and the strategy that sort of helped him make a name for himself way back in the day, a long time ago. But man, has that changed? Like, things are so different, the landscape at quarterback. And, we're losing even more guys. We're seeing Tom Brady. I don't think Brady plays another year. Aaron Rodgers is not the quarterback one that, he's been throughout his career. Like, if you do not have one of those top guys, you're losing a lot. And it's kind of always been my philosophy that, I might pay up at quarterback, I might pay up at tight end. You can't pay up at both and expect to remain competitive at wide receiver, running back. You just sacrifice too much there if you get luxury tight end and a luxury quarterback. The hell with the luxury tight end. And I'm not even going to chase the middle class guys. I'm not going to chase the Hawkinsons and Andrewses and Goddards next year. Like, I'm just going to get one of the big time quarterbacks. I'm going to get Hurts, Mahomes, Herbert, Burrow, like one of the runners or one of the exceptional passers, Mahomes, Burrow, Herbert. I just think you need those guys. Those guys are so important to keeping up with the Joneses in your league. You're going to get trucked by 10 to 12 points at quarterback when you go up against those guys. And, I lost key games in leagues this year because I'm, going out there with, God bless him. I mean, Geno Smith kept me afloat in a couple of leagues, but then I'd go up against Jalen Hurts and I'd get outscored by 15 and lose by 3. And it was frustrating. So I want to be the guy with the luxury quarterback next year.
Look at us. I'm going to read you what my third thing is. And I quote, I'm willing to punt on tight end, but maybe not on quarterback.
There we go.
That is exactly what my third thing is, because yes,
oh, man,
you need to start paying up for quarterback. Now, I think you can potentially still get tricky with it. You could still potentially bet on a guy that you think is going to have the breakout year, but I don't think you can take the budget option. So what I mean by that is you can take the Trey Lance. You can take the Trevor Lawrence, the Justin Fields. You could take the Jalen Hurts last year. But you can't take the Geno Smith. You can't take the Kirk Cousins. You can't take the Derek Carr and just hope that it's going to work. You need something truly dynamic. And so I'm with Pat. I am going to try and get one of those top guys, but I'm not going to quite overpay. And so if it doesn't work, then I'm going to have a list of some guys where I'm like, these are my breakout guys, or these are the guys who I think are elite, but their ADPs being a bit depressed. And I will overpay. I will reach for those guys because I'm not going to be caught dead at quarterback. Whereas with tight end, I'm sorry, unless you have Travis Kelce, who is arguable to be taken at 101 at this point. I mean, I still wouldn't, but you can genuinely make the argument. I don't care. I went through a whole season with Gerald Everett for basically free and was fine. It was fine. But I went through a whole season with Geno Smith and it was less fine. It still was okay. But yeah, there was one point in the season where I almost traded Chris Olave and Austin Eckler to just get Josh Allen and be done with it. I was so close. Luckily, they said no, because that would have probably been giving up a little too much. But I was just man, I am floundering here. I'm starting Marcus Mariota. I'm starting Geno Smith. To be fair, I had drafted Trey Lance, so my circumstance not quite fully punting on the position. But yeah, you need to have one of these top guys. I completely agree with Pat.
This was not on purpose. I'm going to jump in quickly with my third thing, because with how many quarterbacks may be changing teams this coming year, you're going to need to roll with one of these. It's amazing how that worked out. Because my plan was to pick up the baton from what we talked about last week, and we're all ending with basically the same thing.
I think if you take away anything from this podcast, don't punt on quarterback next year. You have 3 Well, two so-called experts and one genuine one in Pat telling you don't punt on quarterback going into next year. And I think it's going to be the prevailing trend. I think you're going to have to mock accordingly. I think, if you play in your home league where you're the only one that listens to the podcast or like follows along with like the fantasy pro stats, the fantasy 6-pack stats, the draft shark stuff, if you're the only one doing those things, you might catch some league mates sleeping. But if you're in a league with some guys that are like, I don't really do mock drafts, but like I listen to the Fantasy Pros podcast, those guys are going to end up learning this by the time draft season comes around. So you need to start prepping for it now. You need to start building it in your mind now that you are just going to have to pay up for one of these guys.
We talked about it however many episodes ago. If a quarterback is any older than I am, they sucked this year. They just did. There's a handful, a very small handful. All of the names were said of the guys that we're talking about, which, and I think I brought it up at the beginning of last episode when I was complaining about the awful keeper choices that I made in our home league. Boy, did I learn from that. So moving forward into next year, like I'm telling you right now, it's being documented. Anybody in our league that listens to the show is going to know.
Keep Hurts.
Hell yeah, I'm keeping Jalen Hurts. Like, why wouldn't I? Like, it makes way too much sense. Like, dude, like I have made like countless dumb decisions with, letting certain players go. Otherwise, I'm not going to make this mistake. I'm just not going to. Hurts, Allen, like a Justin Herbert, something like that. Small group. And once you get past that, like, sure, there's some talented rookies that are coming in possibly in this draft class. I know like 2024's got Caleb Williams at USC, some other interesting guys. Like, kind of bringing it back to that point I made earlier about the talent cycle. It's a little bit of a longer cycle with quarterbacks than it is for, say, running backs in the example that I used earlier. But, like, it still happens.
The pancake is starting to flip.
Yeah, because, like, we've already lost the Phillips Rivers and the Drews Brees of the world. And now some of the other leftovers are, kind of getting out of the way now too. It's a young man's game at quarterback. So you got to be willing to go for some of those dudes. And we are all unified on that front, and I'm very proud. So I guess that brings us to the end
Final
of the
topic.
Yeah. So for those of you who were still in fantasy playoffs, we didn't forget about you. So I'll just quickly go with mine because I don't have a ton to say, and it kind of goes along with something that is going to be brought up by somebody else. If by the time you're listening to this, I think waivers have already run, but like I don't know if maybe dynasty people, out there, if you don't have a trade deadline, if you're looking to, like maybe throw some capital at something to plug some holes somewhere. Zach Moss. Look, I've been burned by this in the past. I am one of the small handful of Zach Moss truthers because for some reason I just love digging around that specific corner of hell where all the average running backs are that I just fall in love with. He got a lot of the looks in close after Jonathan Taylor left that game against the Vikings, and like maybe it'll continue to be that way. Like I'm not thrilled about him necessarily, but opportunity is opportunity. So that would be my guy that I would kind of, and maybe not like matchup specific, just because I'm talking multiple weeks here.
But he does have a great matchup this week.
Oh yeah, who are they
Los Angeles Chargers, baby.
Oh,
it is a great matchup.
Damn. Okay,
that's why it would be a great choice.
I feel so much better about this. Okay,
if you hadn't picked the wrong running back.
There you go. Pick it up.
Because the correct answer is Deion Jackson, a guy that I have been talking about for weeks. And despite Zach Moss getting a ton of work, and he did get a ton of work, let's be clear. And while Herms may be one of the few Zach Moss truthers out there, it turned out Jim Irsay was one of the others. Who'd have thunk? Jackson is the most familiar with this offense. We know Jonathan Taylor is not coming in, unlike last week where they had to pivot. And in the past, when they've had time to prep, they've gone with Deion Jackson as the replacement for Jonathan Taylor. And I think, they signed Jordan Wilkins onto the practice squad or off of the practice squad into the 53-man. To me, that feels more like a Zach Moss replacement than a Deion Jackson replacement. Not saying that they will, It would still take some time to potentially get, but that is a familiar guy with the offense that can run down the field. Deion Jackson is going to be the most likely to take advantage of passing down work, in my opinion. And again, as we just said, it's a great matchup. You can add Jackson in most leagues, to be fair. You can add Zach Moss too. I think you definitely have to get one of these Colts running backs. And personally, for me, that is Deion Jackson.
Pat, down to you. Anything about those guys or anybody else you have?
Well, about those guys, yeah, I was kind of flummoxed about how to rank them this week, and I've got Deion Jackson like 1 or 2 spots ahead of Zach Moss. Like, Zach Moss did get a lot more work last week, but I wonder if the Colts maybe saw him as like their designated clock killer guy, like that, as the more traditional between the tackles guy. And how well did that clock killing thing work out for the Colts last week? Anyway, so I tend to, I totally buy McLateral spin on this situation. And I do tend to think, although I wouldn't want to bet my life on it, but I do think Deion Jackson is probably going to have more touches this week. Not totally sure, but that's kind of the way I'm going. So, but because I'm confused enough about that backfield, I decided to go in a totally different direction with this guy. And I'm going to go with Marquise Goodwin. And Tyler Lockett out at least this week after having surgery on his broken finger. And with Lockett out, it's going to be Metcalf, Goodwin, and Derek Young, Penny Hart, the newly signed Laquan Treadwell. I think it's just basically going to be Metcalf and Goodwin, and some of their tight ends too. Although I think Fant is dealing with some sort of knee issue. And here's the thing: the Seattle running game is totally broken. They have not rushed for over 100 yards in a game for the last 5 games, and they're going to have to throw against the Chiefs. Not that I'm necessarily predicting game script and, they're going to get down and have to play catch up. I don't know about that, but, the Chiefs have given up, I think, the 4th most fantasy points to wide receivers. And Seattle just hasn't been able to run the ball effectively at all. And with the weather all crazy in so many places this week, you guys, with this big system moving through and Cleveland, just this winter hellscape where no one's going to be able to throw. And, they're predicting steady rain in New York tomorrow for Jaguars, Jets, and Chicago, Buffalo is going to be horrible. There are going to be all these places where passing conditions are terrible and you don't want to play any of the receivers there. Like Goodwin is a wide receiver 3 for me in that range. Like he's a top 40 guy. I think I've got him like mid 30s right now. So I think in a week where there might be more call, even with no buys, I think there might be more call for, you might have to dig a little deeper at receiver. And I think Goodwin's a good pull this week.
And we know he has the speed. We definitely know he has the speed to get that done. So as a 1-for-1 kind of replacement for Lockett for, what he could serve in that offense, it makes a ton of sense. And we've seen him be pretty good before in different spots throughout his career. So it's not like it's a name that's unfamiliar to people either, which is another thing he has going for him. It's not like some random dude that's just like, hey, I know you never heard this name before, but how about you go ahead and just trust your semifinals with this? It's someone we know. So that definitely helps. And that is why you tune in to, yes.
I think that's a great pull by Pat. Goodwin is someone I've looked at for the heat check at Fantasy Six Pack more than once because he has produced like a top 36 guy, like a wide receiver 3 or better more than once. Like he's done it over 3-week periods more than once. And I just keep going, like it's the Lockett and Metcalf show. Well, Lockett's gone. He's been the clear wide receiver 3. I got to say, like Pat might really be onto something there. So I am glad that you steered away from our debate about the Indianapolis backfield and went into Gob because that is a great pull.
And that is why you tune in to the Lateral Show, a sideways look at fantasy football with, I believe, just the one check mark. Again, I feel so sorry. I'm sorry to the audience. Like we made so many jokes about it, but I like the Twitter blue features. And if you want to see my stupid check mark that Elon Musk just gave me without asking, fine, thanks, man. You could do that by following me on Twitter at Herms NFL. You can now find all of my work over at draftsharks.com. I got some fun stuff going on there. I think the most recent thing I will have published by the time that this episode comes out is I'm previewing the free agent class, like by position. So that's kind of what I'm going to be getting up to. And then, it's not going to be as timely by the time you're hearing this, but if you're interested in my thoughts about Christian Watson's dynasty value and what I think you should do with him, you could go check that out on the website over there. So it's Herms NFL on the Twitter. Everything I do over at Draft Sharks. McLateral, where can people find you?
Well, you can always find me at McLateralFF. You can also find me at MacMcMillan ATL on Twitter. You can find me at Tom's Guide for my day-to-day job, where I review the latest in tech, gaming, entertainment, etc. And you can find me at Fantasy Six Pack, where this weekend I will be dropping my final Fantasy Six Pack article, because in true the lateral fashion, in true sideways fashion, I'm going on my honeymoon like during championship weekend, basically, for the fantasy playoffs. So I'm going to be in the Canary Islands. My wife would kill me if I wrote fantasy content during that time. So you get week 16 and you're going to like it. Like, I'm sorry, but that's it. Like, that's all I got. So yeah, I look forward to writing that though. It has been a blast doing it this season. And just as it has been a blast doing this podcast as we approach then, it has been a blast having awesome guests like Pat. Pat, thank you so much for coming on. It has truly been a treat.
Take me to the Canary Islands with you, McLateral. I'm in Chicago. It's going to be minus 25 wind chill here this weekend. So, man, I would love to be where it's warm and nice like that. But thanks for having me, guys. Yeah, can find me on Twitter at Fitz_FF. Can find all my stuff at fantasypros.com and check out the Fitz on Fantasy podcast.
100%. Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on, and thank you so much for tuning in, whether you watched the video, whether you listened to the podcast, or whether you just accidentally clicked on this and watched it for maybe 7 seconds because you were looking for something else. We still appreciate you for doing that. We will be back with another episode soon, but until then, do something. We never actually established a good way to transition out of this show. We've done how many episodes at this point, and we've never figured out how.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Lateral Show. Fasten your seatbelts, because here we go.